So what I want to do now is just briefly think together about where the money is coming from and how that gives us what we need to start spending on those priorities that we identified. So tell me, where does the money that counties spend actually come from?
The share from the national share,
Okay.
and the other one is from the local revenue within the county.
Okay.
Grants that are given to counties, and some of them are conditional from the national government.
There is one other major conditional grant that I want to mention. It is the Road Maintenance Levy Fund, and a certain percentage of that is now going to counties as a conditional grant to be used for that purpose, for road maintenance. Okay? Anything else?
The Equalization Fund.
What is the Equalization Fund?
They are given to counties that are less developed compared to the others.
So what kind of transfer is it?
National.
It was optional in the Constitution to give it as a conditional grant or for the national government to spend it directly. And actually what has happened is that the national government is spending it directly. So basically, for our purposes, the Equalization Fund is not a revenue source for counties. Can someone take us a little bit further? Yes, Anna?
There's also donor funding.
Okay, donor funding. So counties can also receive donor funds.
They can also get loans.
Okay, they can also take loans. So let's shift, and I want to ask, if we think about the share of revenues for counties that come from national, let's focus now on the national transfers and the local revenues. Forget about the donor funds and the loans and those things. What is your sense of how much counties are receiving from the national versus how much they are receiving from in local revenues?
The money counties are receiving from the national transfer is quite more than what they generate locally or what they receive from the local revenue.
I think one of the issues which has actually come to our counties is that nobody is talking about what is actually being collected. And everybody's now is concentrated with only what is actually being allocated by the national government. Yes.
Okay, and so can you go to page 29 of your manual, table 1? And you can see it has for 2 years, because these are the 2 years for which we have complete data. We are in 15-16 now. So 13-14 and 14-15, there's targets which are over 20%. But then when you look at the actuals for 13-14 and 14-15, you can see that the actual percent of local revenues to national transfer was less than 14% in 13-14 and about 15% in 14-15. Okay? So what does that mean? In 14-15, almost 85% of all the money that counties were spending in their budgets was coming from the national government. Yeah?
I can give a good example. For instance, in 2013-2014, Isiolo County projected that their local revenue will be 600 million. And that's that actually contribute to the part of the budget. When you talk of planning, you consider what you project to collect locally. That is it. So unfortunately, though they projected to collect 600 million, the only amount they were able to collect was 150 million. So there is that lack of stability in terms of the amount that are collected locally by counties. Plus also, I don't know whether they are ambitious or sometimes they tend to set for themselves a target which in many occasions they do not meet. So basically, the amount of money received from the national transfer is quite more than what is received from the local revenues.
Whenever we talk about targets, and we're going to talk about targets again, so that's one of the reasons I want to make sure we don't miss this now. Whenever you talk about targets, you have to ask yourself, is the target reasonable? Because if you miss a target that was not reasonable, that doesn't necessarily mean anything about your performance. It means something about your target. But if you miss a target that was reasonable, then it is a measure of performance. There's another question you can ask when a county exceeds its target, like was the target too low? You can also set a target which is unrealistically low to make you look good when you exceed it. If you see at the bottom of page 29, you will see that Garissa is at the top. So what did Garissa do? In 13-14, Garissa raised 35.8 million, okay, almost 36 million. But then they set a target of 700 million for the next year, okay, for 14-15. So that's a target increase of 1,850%, as you can see in the next column. And then the last column is just the 15, like if they had set a target of increasing by 15%, how much would it have been? And it would have been the 41 million that you see there, right? So this is just to give you a sense, because what you can see from this table basically is that most of the counties that missed their targets had unrealistic targets. Okay? They expected to increase by a huge amount in 1 year. But I just want to jump to table 31, the table on page 31, which shows what's happening over time for 2 years, 13-14 revenue target versus actual, and then 14-15 revenue target versus actual, so that you can see what's happening. And of course, you can look at individual counties. If we take Baringo, which we've been talking about, you'll see that Baringo collected 77.5% of its target in 2013-14, but it collected 97.6% of its target in 2014-15. So what does that tell us? Well, we have to look at the targets, but in general it tells us that we are getting a bit closer to estimating what we are actually going to collect. Okay? And you can see, if you look at the target between the 2 years, actually the target was not that different between the 2 years, but it went down a little bit. Okay? And revenue collections actually went up substantially during the second year. If you just turn to the end of this table, which is on page 33, that's the summary of what this says. Of course, you can look at your individual counties in your own time, but a summary is the last row, which is the total, and there you can see that counties collected about 49% of what they said they were going to collect in 2013-14, but they collected 67% of what they said they were going to collect in 2014-15. So are we getting closer to our targets? Yes, we are on average. But if you look at individual counties, the story is still mixed. But on average, we are improving in terms of getting closer to our targets getting more realistic, our collections coming closer to them, okay?